It's my privilege to be here with Ethan Hawke and with Maya Hawke, who have just finished principal photography on a rather extraordinary project. It's a film called Wildcat, based on the life and the work of Flannery O'Connor. As anyone that's followed me knows, I'm kind of obsessed with Flannery O'Connor. I think she's the finest, Catholic fiction writer of the last century. So I was thrilled to read the script and thrilled to have the two of you on here today to talk about her and about her work and about faith and spirituality and all sorts of things. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Hey, listen, first of all, how did you both get interested in Flannery O'Connor? So can I have just maybe a quick sense of what was your access to her?
Sure. Well, I think that it's in some degree, my dad has known about and loved Flannery O'Connor for his whole life, but I came to her from an English teacher in high school. I think it was my sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
I had, Benjamin Rudder was my English teacher, and he brought her into the class and assigned some short stories. And we started reading them, and I really loved them. And they started wonderful debates amongst the students. Some people hated them.
Right.
Some people thought they were brilliant. Some people thought we shouldn't read them. And it felt like this activation in my community, in my classroom. And the way that everyone rose and started percolating with energy to think about work and think about art and our society and culture and what it meant, I got excited. And then I went out to the local bookstore by where my dad lives. Books are magic, and I looked for more of her work, and I found the prayer journal. Yeah. Which then took me on a whole journey. I felt I was really working through a lot of pain in myself at that time. We were just talking about it actually, and struggling with ideas of wanting to be great, wanting to contribute something, feeling like you weren't good enough, smart enough, you had nothing to contribute, that kind of ego pendulum swing that we all work on and work through all the time. And I felt so seen in her work, and the idea that someone who I admired so much could hold so much self-doubt and self-hatred was really moving to me at the time and really important. And then I brought that to a film set where my dad was working, and I was sitting in the trailer, which is my favorite place to be in the whole world. Not my own trailer, someone else's. Most people don't like it at all. Like, don't try to bring your friends to a film set. They'll mostly hate it. But I think if you grew up your whole life sitting in trailers and watercoloring and walking around and going to crafty and it becomes a real place of comfort. So I was sitting there, and in between shots and breaks, we just started reading out loud from it together. And together had this idea that I should use it as my audition monologues for drama schools, which I just decided to do. Yeah. And so we edited the journal together down from a long journal into a 2-minute monologue. And I felt like a real rebel because you were only supposed to take monologues from the theatrical canon. But I had this original piece of adapted fiction, and I felt really like it was this incorporation of my more literary side and my performative side, which was my stress about going to conservatory, was that I also love poetry and writing, and that was kind of the two paths for me. And I, due to my inability to get a good SAT score, ended up deciding to take one path over the other, which that's not really the reason. But anyway, and it sort of stayed with us. And it was
can I jump in?
Yes, I'm done.
It was a very beautiful time in our life, because you can imagine as a father how wonderful it is to watch Maya fall in love with Flannery O'Connor and have that bring her to her prayer journal. And the prayer journal is a very beautiful document about a very serious young mind's self-questioning and her search and yearning for a connection with the divine. So as a dad, to see your 16-year-old daughter on her own get so turned on by this, it was very beautiful. And to watch what was so beautiful about the monologue that Maya created out of the prayer journal was it was a very sophisticated piece of the journal, which is the desire to be great an offense to God? is that my ego? That do I really want to be great in service of others, or do I want to be seen as great to serve my own ego? Which was a very odd and peculiar thing to put in a giant audition.
Yeah.
Because do I want to get into Juilliard to be a big shot, or do
Right.
I want to get into Juilliard to serve the craft of acting? You know, and
Well, that comes through in the script to me very strongly, because she was a very ambitious young woman, meaning she wanted to be a well-known writer. She wanted to work with, publishers
and she
in New
didn't
York.
just want to be published.
Right,
She
she-
wanted to be Tolstoy good.
She did.
That was her problem.
But then she also knew that she would give honor and glory to God by writing a great story, that by crafting a great story, that in itself would give glory to God.
And that's St. Thomas, of Aquinas. That's where
Right.
that's where I'll let other people talk, but
Oh, go ahead.
It's the basic theory is that a lot of people go around the world and they go like, who am I? I don't know who I am. And if you want to know who you are, you can make a case to be made, a very compelling case, that God is telling you who you are by what you love.
Yeah.
And if you get close to what you love expands. And in the pursuit of excellence, in any talent that you are given, that everybody is given,
Right.
in the expression of excellence at it, you do honor to your maker.
Right.
And I would only argue that she learned that. And I think that's what we try to do in the movie is tell a little bit of the story of how you learn that. But ambition is wildly discouraged in women. It's both totally embedded in our practice of our relationship with the divine, and it's also embedded in our relationship to society. And it's wildly discouraged. It was probably more encouraged in me than most women in the world. And I still had moments in my life where I said, I want to do something. I think I could do this. And someone was like, God, that sounds ambitious. Okay. And it's so, I think that it's a negotiation that she's going through within the prayer journal, within the script, within her life, that I think a lot of us can relate to is, does this actually make me a bad person and actually interrupt my relationship to my higher self, to the divine? Or does society want me to stay small and want me to see myself as small? And have they created all these obstacles in the idea of what it means to be a good person, a good woman, that so that I trick myself into thinking that being good is being small, when it's not necessarily?
What is the right manifestation of pride? What is because pride can be negative and pride can be dignity.
Right.
Pride can be self-respect.
Right.
Pride can mean honor. And what is the right manifestation of artistic ambition? When you let the flames of your ego be fanned so much that
Right.
everything is just in service of you.
Right.
With her work, the discipline inside of it is staggering. The art, when you really break it down, sentence by sentence, what she's trying to talk about, and the fact she never takes the easy path. She doesn't leave you with answers. She presents you with, you finish a story like Parker's Back, and you're moved, but you don't know why.
Yeah.
And then you have to read it again. Why did that upset me so much?
Yeah.
Why did he get the tattoo? Why didn't she like the tattoo? Why is he getting a tattoo of Christ? Why is it so important to him? What is the, he crashes his tractor against a tree and he really feels, and I'm very moved by that, because a lot of times I think we are offered moments of grace. We are offered moments of enlightenment. And what do we do with them? What is the right? We don't always respond right to the.
Didn't
what
she
we're
say
given.
her stories are about the offer of grace typically refused?
Yes,
So
yes.
There's a breakthrough of grace, but then I don't know what to do with it.
I don't know what to do with it.
I miss it, or I mess
and
it up.
I've had friends like that. I've had moments in my own life where you momentarily get it.
Yeah.
You get that you're a part of something much bigger, and it's like there's like a crack in this banal treadmill that we're all on, and all of a sudden you see it, and how to take what you just saw, felt in your bones. She has another great line I love, which is, faith is what you know to be true, even if you don't believe it. It's like your body sometimes knows something's true. You know there's a larger truth that your intellect can't quite grasp. And she has that other great line that if you could understand God, God would be less than you.
Right. And that's from St. Augustine. If you understand it, that's not God.
Yeah. Because it's much, and so her search and her ability to put the search into art, that you then have to say, okay, wait, I have had moments of grace. Did I respond right? Did I know how to incorporate? And that's the great value of organized religion, is to give us a net to kind of guide us of what to do with these moments and how, but very quickly we go back to sleep and just do
no, quite right. And she knew, it seems to me, that grace in a fallen world usually hurts. Grace usually has to break into your life in some kind of painful way, which makes the stories hard. I remember, to Maya's point, years ago I assigned A Good Man's Hard to Find in one of my theology classes. And it was a class we called the Doctor of Ministry, so a lot of lay people were in the class. And there was a lady who was a mother and a wife and very devout Catholic, and she said, why did you give us that awful story to read? And she meant it.
Oh, yes, she
meant it as a reproach to me, like, why would you do that?
Why would you do that?
And it's, because grace often comes in that painful way. It has to break through something.
We have the line in the movie, joy is sorrow overcome. You know, that she doesn't make, what's her line? Religion is not a warm electric blanket. It's the cross.
It's the cross, right.
And the cross holds the suffering of the world. Right. I mean, this is a very profound symbol of human suffering, and failure of community. They can be presented with the child of God and crucify him. Like we live in a fallen world. It's like, to make it all nice and make it all warm and fuzzy, you're not really talking about faith, because that's not that faith you can't take into your daily life.
Right.
Because you're.
Well, I was going to say, and I think what you were saying about organized religion kind of applies to all community and all organization of people coming together and having a community with which to reflect your experience back at you. And I think that we are doing that in the movie, of this understanding of the artistic community and artistic practice as some kind of practice of faith. And and grace can come in these giant moments of being sorrow overcome, or in these like violent stories, but and that is definitely the way that Flannery sort of saw that happen. But we were just driving up here for a couple hours in the car, and on an iPhone speaker listened to a song we both heard, and both dropped a tear on the iPhone speaker and looked out the window and and it felt like a tremendous moment of grace.
Sure. Yeah.
And there is sorrow overcome in that, in the past and the present, and artistic creation and a relationship to the singer, and there's all kinds of larger works at play in a micro moment of grace and softness.
Yeah, I think it's certainly true.
And so there's in the community that we've built and that we share of poets and singers and concerts we've gone to and songs we heard live, and people, there's community is what matters, and where we can bring our perspective and our experience and our painful moments, our big moments, our lovely, wonderful moments, and bring them to our community and see them reflected back at us. And I think that's
sharing, and we understand each other, and we understand that our experiences are often not as unique as they feel. That other people do know what we're going through. And other people can understand. And when you feel understood, you feel the capability of understanding. And things open up. I mean, and that's the value that we can give each other.
Yeah, no, quite right. Hey, tell me, why Wildcat? Now, Wildcat's not one of her better known stories. It's an early story of hers. Short, very short stories, maybe 6-7
one thing
pages.
I feel like is this is our first interview about the movie. This is our first public dialogue about something we've been working on for a long time. And I should make it clear that this is the first time I have ever been hired to make a film. My daughter fell in love with Flannery O'Connor, and she wanted to play Flannery O'Connor. she was very moved by him there's many obvious reasons, and some subtle ones, but she met the people that owned the rights and wanted to do it, and then she got on a Zoom and offered me a job of would I want to, would I want to direct such a movie
and write it.
And I really,
it's a big job.
What's funny is I remember, my wife is my producing partner. We got off this Zoom, and I was like, I can't imagine anything I would want to do more. And it's strange that it's coming at me from my daughter. But do I want to make a movie about Flannery O'Connor? Yes. The answer is yes. And would I like to do it with you? Yes. And there's a joke about titles, to answer your question.
Yeah.
Which is, Richard Linklater and I have worked together a lot, and when we were doing Boyhood, we just, first we called it the 12-year project, then we started calling it Boyhood, and we spent 12 years trying to think of a title for this movie, right? And his joke is they either come early or not at all. And sometimes it's the first thought, best thought thing, which is, Maya was like, well, why don't we call it Wildcat? Because she's a multi-dimensional, there's something funny to me, humorous about calling it Wildcat, because Wildcat kind of makes you think of Wildcats and a cheerleader, or something that's kind of classic, kind of,
which would not be Flannery O'Connor.
And then you see Flannery with her crutches and her scowl and her teeth and her anger and her poise and her ferocity. But there's a Wildcat inside this demure, small, polite young woman.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of her first stories, and I was like, that's the title.
Go ahead.
To me, what I thought about it was that this idea of the kinds of women we see. When you think of a wildcat and with a leading lady, like, you see like Catwoman, or like this kind of like romanticized, eroticized version of like the feminine feline energy. When you see a wild cat in the wilderness, I mean, there's like you mean like a lion or a puma or something, and there's that, but a wild house cat, or it's like they've got things sticking in their hair, and it's barbed, and they're hungry, and they're usually sick, because they've been like abandoned and neglected, and like they've got stuff in their eyes, and they're angry, and if you spark them, they'll bite you, and
that's certainly her.
So it's this, and we don't see movies about women like that. We don't see that kind of multi-dimensional, gritty, gross femininity that exists very much, especially if you combine it with a wild intelligence. And so, to me, that's what that was about, is like this kind of woman, whether you like her or not, whether you think she's a good person or not, it doesn't matter. Like, we should talk about her. And so that's partly why I thought that story and those words belonged under, below her face.
It really related to the idea that Maya was going to be playing multiple characters. She's not just playing Flannery O'Connor. She's also playing the aspects of Flannery that she put into her stories. So it was kind of this, we could have easily come up with a peacock theme or something about multi-dimensionality, but the Wildcat it's wild. It can go any direction, and I kind of felt like that's what her performance was going to do. We were going to do not just Flannery, but all the aspects of a woman that are inside one woman, and that was the goal of the movie.
Yeah, it's a remarkable part of the script, of course, how you weave together the life of Flannery at a particular moment, and then these various characters who do represent her in different ways, with different aspects of her.
Well, I have to say, that's all him. I mean, the moment I brought this project to him, and then a couple months later, we sat down at a cafe together, because when I brought it, I was like, I don't know if this is possible. Like, I know this woman's life and what happened, and I don't know if there's a movie in it. There's a brilliant language and stories, but I don't know if there's a movie in someone who grew up in a small town, dad died, worked really hard, got a good education, got sick, came home, wrote stories, died. Essentially, like, there's not a lot of friends in the story. There's not a love interest. There's not, like, where is the movie here? And so I didn't know if it was possible. And then a couple months later, we are sitting in a cafe, and he presented to me this idea of how imagination, faith, and reality intersect, and how we could tell that in a movie by interweaving the stories and the life, and show how within all of us we are a kaleidoscope, like a mandala of different people and different characters, different lenses, and we take all those little bits of ourselves and we concentrate them into characters and create art so that we can live our lives through our expression. And that's when I was like, oh, I definitely found the right man for the job. Like, you know, I mean, and not to mention, just also one thing you left out was a big part of the reason that I even had the thought that we should do this together was because you were going through this amazing kind of personal journey of realizing how your practice of the arts, your relationship to acting, your relationship to your artistic community was your spiritual compass and your spiritual devotion throughout your life, or at least a big part of it. And that's what
It hit me at a weird moment because I was just turning 50, and I momentarily became extremely depressed that I felt I hadn't honored the part of myself. When I was a young man, I was extremely interested in religion and faith. It was very, very important to me, and it was everything I thought about. And I felt like how did I get to 50 and never get past first base with my exploration of faith? And then the clouds moved away, and I realized that my dedication to the arts had become the manifestation of that faith, and that I wasn't on first base, and I hadn't. And then Maya coincidentally calls him and says, "You want to make a movie about Flannery O'Connor?" Now, Flannery was very important to me at that time period when I was young. Flannery, Thomas Merton, Walker Percy, Dorothy Day, there were people that were really...
That mid-century flowering of
And that's what my
Christian
parents grew up on. And so
intellectualism.
when I was interested in aspects of faith, that's what they were giving. That was what was important in my house. You know, those are the books that I found, and Seven Story Mountain. And so when it was almost like a voice from the past coming from the present future, you know, Maya's passion for Flannery, I was like, wow, interesting. What if I could revisit my 24-year-old self and where I was in my faith journey then with what I've learned about the arts in the last 25 years? And what if I can incorporate Maya and Flannery they have a kind of punk rock energy to their sensibilities. There's a ferocity to the way Maya thinks that I understand why she likes Flannery. And I thought, what if we could make a movie that Flannery would be proud of, that Maya would be proud of?
See, I think what you're talking about is exactly what she saw. And I'll flip it around using Thomas Merton. Merton said at one point, a bad book about the grace of God is still a bad book. You know what I mean? It's on the best possible topic, but it's a bad book. And I think of Paul Tillich, the Protestant theologian.
I love him.
He said there could be more authentic religion in a Cézanne still life than a kitschy crucifix. You know, so an authentic work of art, and that's the Aquinas point you're making that she would have understood very well.
And that speaks to what that woman in your class wants. What she wants from art. Sometimes we all want this. Is we want Thanksgiving dinner. We want to be made to feel better.
Pleasant
and we want
uplifting.
And a true spiritual journey is going to help us through the real work of our life. It's not going to be Thanksgiving dinner every day. And you need a set of rules and a vantage point inside your body and inside your brain where you can navigate all the vicissitudes of life, right? And it's not going to be there's a place for Norman Rockwell, and I love it too. But what Merton is saying, Merton was always willing to ask the tough questions. You know, I was thinking about him when she was young, and you were thinking like, all right, I really want to be a writer, and I really want to be an actor. I love music, and I have to choose. And the truth is, you don't have to choose. You need to work on yourself and let it take care of itself. And Merton had this, his journals are so moving about his desires to be a writer and his desire to give his life to God and feeling like he had to choose.
Yeah.
And then the journey of his life is, what did he do? He became one of the great Catholic writers.
Right.
He actually could have them both. He just needed to do it step by step.
And his first abbot saw that when he first joined the monastery, and he thought, okay, I'm done with writing, I'm done with the New York thing, I'm a Trappist monk. But his first abbot, to his great credit, said, no, I want you writing.
Keep writing.
And then it took him, as you say, a while to kind of grow fully into that.
Yeah.
But I think that's what Flannery got too, that she was trying so hard to write a perfect story, write a beautifully crafted story.
That's
and
what
that
she
gave
felt
honor to God.
That's what she felt honored.
Yeah.
Honored
Yeah.
God. And that she didn't have to honor God by telling one lie.
Right.
I'm not going to tell these stories about perfect people.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell stories about the world I live in and how that, and like the Cezanne painting, that is spiritual art. I'm going to really look at this apple. I'm going to really look at this woman, this person, this situation. I'm going to look at it hard.
Right. And that's honoring the Lord. And she got that, which that comes through to me very strongly in the script, which is great. Let's talk a bit about the stories, because you wove in there some of my favorite of her stories. They're all marvelous, and they all have that spiritual power to them. Like Parker's Back is one of my favorites, and that comes up a number of times, actually, in the script. This man who has a prophetic name, so he gives his name Parker, Obadiah Elihu. So he's a prophet, and that's a big theme in Flannery O'Connor is, can you live up to your prophet's identity? And see, it's right in the theme we've been talking about, because to be a prophet means you're going to speak God's word. You're going to do the authentic thing in your life rather than what pleases the crowd or what pleases, whoever. And can you do that? Can you bear the prophetic identity?
Most of us are human beings and most of us fail.
Yeah.
But the attempt is value. Parker, my wife and I read that to each other out loud, and I found it, for those people who don't know, it's very simple. A young couple kind of falls in love. They're looking for each other. He is covered in tattoos. He's kind of a troublemaker. She's very devout. And in trying to please her, it's this amazing idea. We often love people the way we want to love, not the way they need to be loved.
Yeah, right.
So to please her, he gets a tattoo. She loves Jesus. So he gets a tattoo of Jesus. She doesn't like tattoos, but anybody reading the story knows as he's going to get this tattoo, she's not going to like this, But there's something beautiful about it that you can't put your name on, because is it the inner Christ within all of us that's appearing in his back that she who claims to be devout turns away from?
Yeah.
Is he lost and he has this very true spiritual moment, and instead of taking the moment, absorbing it, and going to his wife to talk to about the moment, he gets a tattoo about the moment, which is there's so much there's so much real, earnest desire for healing and good that gets miscommunicated and ends up hurting.
Go ahead.
It's a trendy thing to talk about now, but it's in the idea of virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Have you heard that expression?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of different signaling that we do to each other and for each other.
I'm a good person because I think X.
I'm a good person because
Right.
I think X. I'm a tough person because I have tattoos. I'm a sweet person because I button my collar up all the way. And so we have all these ways that we communicate with each other that we're trying to show people what we want them to think is on the inside by putting things on the outside. And I think that the Parker's Back is an interesting story in the way that it serves the movie, because in my opinion, in most of the stories, Flannery sees herself in one character more than the other. From my point of view. I mean, I'm sure she would, spit in my face. I don't know. But in Parker's Back, I think both of them are two sides of the same coin of a negotiation that my idea of Flannery is having with herself, which is about, do I want to behave so that people know who I am when they look at me from the outside? Do I need everyone to understand me right away?
Yeah.
Or do I want to be perfectly good on the inside and not care what anybody thinks of me? And so, Sarah Ruth is this kind of practicing, pious person who who's more humble and taking care of her family and has this, and wants love and has boundaries, and then Parker is this audacious who paints himself and it wants everyone to see
Drinks
him
too much
and drinks too much, wants everyone to
talks
see
too
him,
loud.
know who he is.
Yeah, he's no saint.
No saint at all.
No, and he's signaling that he's got this name, and he's signaling to her, this is who I am, this is who I am, this is who I am. And I think to me what that story becomes about is, how do we feel about the way that we're seen? And can we ever be seen for who we really are? And yeah, exactly.
And can we see
How come
others?
she beats him in your judgment? So she sees the image of Christ, this kind of fierce Byzantine Christ, not a friendly Christ. And then she beats. To me, the most moving part of that story is that when the image then begins to, the welts form and the blood comes, and so Jesus himself, bleeding on his back.
Well, obviously, as an actor, you have to separate yourself a little bit from the metaphoric landscape and get into the human nitty-gritty of what a person's motivation would be to do such a thing. And in the scene before, he goes to kiss her hand and she hits him. And we decided to do that, and it really started to inform the character. It was just a joke bit that me and Raphael, who plays Parker, came up with, and as soon as it happened, it felt totally right to me. And Sarah Ruth would have grown up in a world of violence, and so would Parker. A world I did not grow up in. But a world where people hit each other, and that was a part of the landscape of communication, and even potentially the landscape of love. In where those people are and when they are. And so, first of all, I think within the context of that world and those two people, her hitting him with the broom is maybe more ordinary. It's so extreme.
Than it might feel to us.
Is maybe more ordinary. And so there's that. And then if you connect it with the metaphoric feeling of where the emotion comes from, I think, in the way that I tried to play it and felt as her in the moment, a profound feeling of being misunderstood. You don't understand my faith. You don't understand my life. You don't understand how to be my husband. He's coming back from...
If you would get that tattoo, you don't understand my faith or me at all.
And all she probably would have wanted was him to come home on time, right? And not come home drunk, not come home in the morning, and have left her to suffer and wait and wonder when she's pregnant, and instead he's trying to love her in this way that's so not,
It's very interesting too that Flannery puts a broom in Sarah Ruth's hand at the beginning and end of that story. And the broom is kind of an old-fashioned symbol of the matriarchy, right? The person who cleans the house. And there is some matriarchy or patriarchy war happening.
Totally.
Of what is the right power dynamic. He's really into Sarah Ruth until she gets pregnant. Pregnant women were not his favorite kind. And now she needs him. Now he doesn't want to be needed, so he still wants to be loved and adored, right? And that happens to a lot of men when they fall in love and get married, and then the mother begins putting her adoration on the child, and the male is lost. There's some symbol of matriarchy, patriarchy going like this.
And to me, that's a war within Flannery too. That she grew up with these women who were more like traditionally feminine roles, and then she has all this ambition and drive that is in the world of men in her time, and still in some ways, but in her time for sure. And so, and is her desire to be a great writer, to paint pictures. He's got pictures of him. She paints pictures and puts them up on her wall, and it paints paints pictures in her stories, and is that desire a masculine desire? And is it a desire that betrays and breaks the...
And she's also trying to paint a picture of God with her art, so there's something I always felt that she saw herself almost more as Parker. We could talk about these stories forever.
Yeah.
No, because I think, that's the richness of it, of course, because I see him too as a guy that's discovering a prophetic vocation. He's ashamed of his name. He won't even reveal his name.
Yeah. He's ashamed of being a humble servant of God.
Right, and then he bears the image of Christ. So that's all of us, right? We have the imago Christi in us. And what's that like to bear that? Well, it's always going to be a painful
Wait, I don't know
thing.
what that is.
The image of Christ.
The image of Christ.
The divine within.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that we're all, as it were, she would have believed that, of course, as a Catholic, all stamped with the image of Christ. And so what happens when you start living that out? And one of the signs of it is you're going to get an awful lot of abuse.
You're going to get rejected.
You're going to get rejected.
Fascinating.
And so he does have a spiritual moment with that tree. This is the way he manifests. That's why I feel like sometimes I feel like that tattoo is actually the inner Christ manifesting on his back. And she, the devout one, rejects it. And that's the complicated world we live in.
No, and I think it was really helpful because it's typical of Flannery O'Connor. There's never a simple-minded explanation.
And she would reject as soon as
all of these characters are multivalent, and they're good and bad. They're fallen and saved. Each one is an opportunity of grace for the other. Could you say the face of Christ on Parker's back is an opportunity for grace for his wife, and she doesn't?
I could have brought them together beautifully.
And he's had opportunities for grace that she's offered and he's rejected. So I think that's typical of her modus operandi.
I had a very interesting. Do you know Teilhard?
Sure. All that rises must converge.
Yeah, well, that's where she got that title from, and he had a big impact on her writing at the end of her life. And it's interesting that I'd say about 6 of the 7 stories that we drew from are after her influence from him. Well, whether it's his influence, I don't know. She was maturing. She was maturing in her writing, and really, really deepening. And I tried to pick. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that I'd selected 6 of 7 that were like the last ones she wrote. That happened. It happened just accidentally. I was looking for the ones that I saw the most of her in. And interestingly enough, she was more interested in like the third person, really studying other people. And she started looking more and more inward. Enduring Chill is a scathing self-portrait. Good Country People is a scathing self-portrait.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because it's one of my favorite Good Country People, and it's portrayed vividly in the script. A character she often goes after is the sort of self-important, overeducated, intellectual.
I wonder why.
And so here's this woman whose real name is Joy, but she changed it to Holga to be the ugliest name possible, right? And she has an artificial leg. The bottom part of her leg had been injured
And Flannery's walking around in crutches herself. So it's like,
and the story culminates in this rather wicked fellow, Bible salesman who actually doesn't believe in God or anything, and steals her leg from her, right? Steals the artificial leg.
it's so heartbreaking.
It is a heartbreaking story. But talk about that thematically a little bit. How did you see that as reflective of either Flannery herself?
I found in her letters she wrote to a friend of hers that this was her foray into the most autobiographical character she had written. And I found that. And then you start thinking about it, and it is pretty obvious. The mother says to her, "I know you want to be off somewhere working on your PhD," and it's
her mother's all over the stories, isn't she? Flannery's mother is all over the stories.
And that's the other reason why the stories I picked is where do I see Regina as well? And and it's obviously Flannery would bucket that. It's not Regina. It's not autobiography if she wanted to write, but she's putting aspects of herself under the microscope. And what's fun, in classic Flannery style, he is a wicked guy selling Bibles who doesn't believe in God, but in a way, she's just as wicked. Because she thinks she's so much smarter than him.
Absolutely.
That she's going to seduce him and kick him aside because play with him like a cat. And she ends up getting played with. And there's a funny line that we put in the movie that's actually taken from one of her letters about. I find this endlessly amusing that she finds that story really funny, Flannery, because she says to her friend, "What's more comic than a proud, angular woman approaching God inch by inch with grinding teeth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, in that humility,
Right.
humility.
Right.
And she's trying to teach herself humility through that story. No matter how smart you think you are, it doesn't matter.
And
Go ahead,
the
Mike.
interesting thing that I feel like we learned while exploring putting the story up, you know,
Acting it out.
Yeah.
which is one of my favorite things about doing the whole movie is how much you learn about a story and how deeply you get into it when you have to portray it. It changes it so much, and it's why I love movies and plays and acting, you know, as much, if not more, than like the written word, because you get so deep, you know, when you're doing it and find new levels. And the thing I found about those two characters of Hawke and the Bible salesman, he says he doesn't believe in God in the end. Is he telling the truth?
Yeah. Who
Was he
knows?
telling the truth in the beginning?
Yeah.
Which one was a lie? Were they both a lie?
Right.
Does he even know who he is or whether or not he believes in God? And with her, it's the same. Like, she projects this idea that she's so competent and strong and independent and doesn't believe in anything. Does she?
true? Yeah.
Is it true?
Right.
Like, what does she think about when she's going to bed at night? And how does she really feel? And
She even has that line to her mom in the beginning, do you ever think about what you're not? God. And then she goes on to talk about it, she doesn't believe in God, but she clearly does.
Yeah.
With that statement. She unveils like that there is something greater that you're not. And then she covers it up. So that's where her writing, that's where she reaches another level, because nobody is two-dimensional. And everybody's multifaceted.
No, quite right. Yeah, and she's so good at that. And if we follow the basic rubric of the the offer of grace usually refused. I mean, so there, the offer of grace, to my mind, is the stealing of the leg. When her leg is stolen, that's the opportunity of grace, and it's offered by this.
And that is, you know, what's that line? When people talk about grace, they like to omit the fact that before it heals, it cuts with the sword Christ came to bring.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And that moment of her leg being taken away is actually, yes, painful, a giant opportunity for growth.
Right. And she can't move with that same confidence, and she can't. She clambers up the ladder to get to the loft, and and the guy says, "Well, you can't do that. Just watch me do it." And so the confidence there is undermined, and then she's open then to something. As you say, the humility is introduced.
And we could, in reading it out loud, you came to the theory that it probably what prompts Manly to steal the leg is her looking down on him.
Yeah, right.
That if she hadn't have looked down on him, because she spends the whole time saying she doesn't believe in God, and then she's angry at him when he says, "I don't." What he's saying is, "I don't either."
Yeah.
Why is she mad at him about that?
Right.
Like, because she looks down on him. She doesn't think he could possibly be as intelligent as her, and that makes him so angry. You think you're so smart? I'll take your leg.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's this whole other level there where she's mad at him because he lied, and what lies signal when people start changing in front of you. You said this, oh, but now you mean this. Maybe I'm not safe, right?
Yeah.
There's like a slow beginning of a realization that you're not safe, which she isn't, and is also why she doesn't want him to take off her leg, because in the having of the leg is your power.
Yeah.
It's your ability to move, your ability to run, your ability to get down from the barn.
Right, to get away if she has to.
What he wants, and part of why I think he wants to take her leg,
he wants to
disempower her.
Yeah.
And that gets, and the fact that they're going up into this hayloft.
Although it is complicated, he does want to. You're right, but she's so smart. There's another thing he says that is very moving about it, which is it's what makes you special. And I want to get to know. And that is. Now that's why everything is so complicated.
I mean, we could talk about it forever, but then it's like, well, yeah, having it might be what makes you special, but the part of me I love is the part of me that, like, I'm not ready for that level of vulnerability, and like I want you to love me and my strength, and you haven't
earned that vulnerability.
Yeah. And then of course, like, the vulnerability is given, and there's this moment of like potential relief of like being seen and loved and cared about, and then it cuts with a knife, and then your strength and power is taken. And I think to me the story is such an intense metaphor metaphor about male and female sexual dynamics, and like of course they are up in this hayloft and having this moment,
which is the iconic kissy place.
And so it's like, oh, am I going to give you my vulnerability? In exchange, will you take my power? Like, where will it leave me? How will I feel? And like, is that what we want a sexual exchange to be? No. Like, how can we fix it? So there's this, I don't know. To me,
it's why we're still talking about it 70 years later, because if you dig in, it really prompts it prompts your own brain to engage. And I think that's what great art does, is it invites you, if you're watching a movie, it invites you to be a part of it.
Right.
You know?
A very similar story is one of my favorites, which is Revelation, and that features in the script too. It's a similar dynamic, isn't it? I mean, so Mrs. Turpin is someone who's utterly confident in her piety and in her
and
goodness,
she's virtue signaling.
And virtue signaling all the time.
While secretly wishes everyone in the room would go in a gas oven.
We hear the inner monologue, which is hypercritical of everybody in the room. But then the delicious moment, I presume you play Mary Grace, right, in that scene. So here's this kind of disheveled-looking young woman, and Mrs. Turpin sees her as
she's reading Human Development.
Human Development. And of course, then she hurls Human Development across the room and hits Mrs. Turpin over the eye. And what's the line? It's, go back to hell
where you came from, you old warthog.
Yeah.
And of course, the fact that her name is Mary Grace, we're not going to miss that. So again, Grace breaks through, sometimes very painfully, and coming from often very disagreeable people, And that raises a very interesting question that she wrestled with, which is the problem of suffering in its different way, the problem of evil. Why would God allow so much wickedness in the world? Well, one angle is sometimes it's precisely through wicked people that breakthroughs occur. God uses even people's sin sometimes to cause a breakthrough in somebody else.
It's very complex, but at its simplest level, death. Why do we have to die? Like, one of the things we all think, like, we all see death as a dark thing, and we see friends die or young people die, and we see this, and it's like, and it's so counterintuitive, but if we don't die, we don't live.
Yeah.
So that's where, if you could understand it, it's not God. Like, for goodness to exist, for there to be a developing, healing, loving power, for love to exist, anger and malice, there has to be a counter energy, or it's not love.
And no individual is one or another. Like, there is no, even within the stories, even within characters, Mary Grace isn't good and Mrs. Turpin isn't evil, or vice versa. They are both fully complicated and in discussion and dialogue with each other and with themselves.
I mean, Mrs. Turpin needs a book thrown in her head.
She really does.
She really needs somebody to throw a book at her.
Right.
And then the amazing moment at the end of that story, she's so judgmental about every race, every person, everything, just wickedness.
Categorizing people.
Categorizing everybody. And then she sits and has this, she hears the chorus of crickets screaming hallelujah with every chirp. She has this vision of heaven. And the thing, she can't believe people of other races are being allowed into heaven. She can't believe it. Even lunatics?
Yeah, right.
And of course, it's so, when you read it, it is funny, but it's the idea that we don't accept crazy people get to go to heaven.
Right.
How could that be? And where even their virtues are burned away.
The single greatest line, in my judgment, in Flannery O'Connor is that one. Even their virtues are being burned away.
Because we take such pride in our virtues. And if they are virtues, they are not ours.
And they got to be burned away.
They don't belong to us. You don't, that's why the peacock is the great symbol, that as if they were responsible for their feathers.
Yeah, right.
Right? That's all of us. You sing a beautiful song. The reason why you can't let your ego get carried away with being a fabulous, great artist is because it doesn't belong to you.
It's like the Jeff Tweedy quote.
Tell him, it's Jeff Tweedy has this great quote about when you realize, when people are singing your words, it can be very moving and like, wow, a whole thousands of people singing my words. And then you realize they don't love my words. They love rock and roll.
Yeah.
They love to come to show. They love poetry. I didn't invent poetry. I didn't invent the GDA chord progression. This thing's a winner every time.
Right.
They love coming to concerts. And I am part of this collective dance. And when you have a humility like that, then it relaxes you, and you're not taking responsibility for your feathers. There's a great playwright I worked with once said, like, the problem with the author being at rehearsal is the other people in the room think the author is there.
Right.
If the author's any good, they were actually witness to, what he called the flame of Dionysus, but he means the Holy Muse.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not me, it's something
if I
took
did
hold of
any
me.
good at all,
Yeah.
it's that I worked something that was given. And your job as actors is to witness that same flame.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you should go left or right. I don't know I don't know what costume you should have. I mean, I have ideas, but I'm not right. And that's humility again too, right?
When Merton comes to Gethsemane, so he's just beginning his monastic, career, and he says, I thought at first I've really undergone this great change. I'm a great virtuous man. Then I realized that my pride has just become spiritual pride, and my gluttony's become spiritual gluttony, and my lust has become spiritual lust, and that's that idea, I think, of your virtues being burned away. Of course, your vices have to be burned away, but then your virtues too are getting in the way, maybe more than your vices are, because your vices can lead you to the liberating collapse.
How many people have we known who have survived addiction?
Right.
That become some of the wisest,
right.
most compassionate, most loving people. I mean, that path of when people suffer through self-inflicted addiction problems is some of the most wise people I know.
Right.
Are people who have come to wisdom through great suffering.
Yeah.
Even if it's self-imposed,
And the real danger is that kind of pharisaical danger of, no, I'm good,
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, time and again in her story, it seems to me, it's
as soon as you think
someone
you're
that
good,
says,
you've definitely
no,
lost
I'm
it.
okay,
Right.
I don't need to be saved,
Yeah.
And then grace, yes, you do need to be saved. And grace might knock you down and throw you off kilter.
It kept humbling him through his life. I mean, that's so, as life does, there's another great Flannery line about mystery doesn't evaporate, the more you learn.
It deepens, it opens, yeah.
It actually opens. You think but it doesn't. And I find, I watched Maya play last night. She played a concert for all these people who really love her music. And there I was, here in my 50s, having a feeling I have never had before. A feeling I don't understand. Feeling I have no name for. I don't have the vocabulary for the feeling of watching other beautiful young people sing along to a song that my daughter wrote, and watching her thrive, and watching you excel at what you do, and it almost, you remember when you're like 13 and it's the first time you notice that like girls are pretty, you're like, what is this feeling? Like you're not, it's like a new feeling, right? You're like, what, how do I make, that's how I felt watching you play. I was like, what, I don't know where this feeling goes. I don't know what it, and it's a feeling of growing up. It's a feeling of like, my role is changing. I used to go to rock concerts. I used to, I like, and now I'm the dad at a rock concert.
Different texture opened up there.
And this is an amazing opportunity. I've never been here before. This is really cool.
Yeah.
But it's like a bat to the head a little bit, because it knocks you out of your, the plateau you've been walking on for a while. It's forcing you somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a great misunderstanding about like life that you ever graduate. I've been thinking about this all, like that there's any kind of plateau that you reach.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a bill that you get sold throughout your teen years, or like, and you're like, don't worry, middle school's terrible, high school will be better. Like, don't worry, high school's the
terrible.
worst.
When you get to college,
you get to college, you can have a great time.
Hey, college sucks, but soon you'll be out.
Growing up and it'll be great. Like, and this idea that we keep, that there's going to be some place you're going to get where all of a sudden everything's going to make sense and nothing's going to change anymore. And at least so far, I don't think that's true. Like,
it's one of the things what I love about the monastic life when I've studied it, like when I'm mostly through Merton, is there's a constant process of mentorship, of work. Like you're constantly working towards the next level. You're a novice. There's this, and I felt the same way with piano maestros, like real, that, if you're a 22-year-old great piano teacher, you're coaching 8-year-olds. When you're in your 40s and you're at another level of piano, you're coaching the 25-year-olds. When you're 45, you have a teacher who's 80, there's this feeling of constant education.
Yeah.
And I wish we had that. I mean, I talk about this a lot with acting because we don't have a culture,
of mentorship and apprenticeship.
We don't. And what happens is, you've seen it, I've seen it, young actors who show an incredible amount of talent, and society can make a lot of money off that talent. So all they do is nurture the negative aspects of that individual's personality to get them through the next show, the next way to make them. And nobody is taking responsibility for that young person's artistic development so that when they are 72, they fulfilled their potential on this earth and this journey around.
And that goes back to our earlier point. They need a spiritual mentor because it's a craft that's being developed, and to see it as something sacred in your life.
I've often told Maya this, you can't, it's not a job by job basis. She's like, how do I do this job? It's like, you do this job exactly the way you're going to do your whole life. This job of playing Flannery O'Connor, this job of singing this concert, these are stepping stones in your development as an artistic person. And if you start seeing yourself on that long walk, then you survive the bad job, the big highs. You're not that good. You're not that good yet. You're well aware of it. But then they attack you. I'm not that bad either. That's not true. You know, I'm working really hard. And if you can start to see it like it is a spiritual life. A sincere life dedicated to the arts is one that is reflecting human life. We all have a different role to play in society, and the artistic community has one job.
See, I'd refer to it, I think she probably would too, as your vocation.
Your vocation.
It's a calling.
That's the right word.
From God.
Yeah, that's the right word.
And
if you see it like that, it's lifelong.
Right.
And it doesn't have a graduation.
Right.
You know, it doesn't.
Keeps moving to a deeper place. Absolutely.
I remember you called me on set one time and you talked to me about your habits. And you were having like not a good time in the environment that you're in. You're like, but I feel so reassured by my own habits. Because I realize even though this is not my favorite job I've ever done, I'm still making friends. I'm still being nice to people. I'm still like existing as a person I can vaguely recognize and understand because I've been doing this so long that my body knows how to be here and knows how to do this. I have good habits in my work, and it stayed with me. And about when you have the opportunity to practice good habits through your, just like,
they'll help you.
They'll help you and through hard times.
You know, and the script is about that in some ways, isn't it? Because of her experience at the Iowa, Writers School, the role that Robert Lowell plays in her life, and that comes through in the script. Mentorship. Talk about Robert Lowell, because I found him an intriguing character in the script. He's called Cal. I don't know why they call him Cal, but that was his nickname.
Caliban.
Yeah.
He was a tricky guy. It was a nickname based on Caliban from Tempest.
But talk about that, because he's an intriguing figure to me in the script.
Can I start and then kick it to you?
I think you should start.
I find it extreme. I've been learning a lot about feminism through my relationship with my daughter, like a lot of men do with our relationships. Anyway, but Robert Lowell, there's a lot of men in Flannery's life that are really pivotal in us having that copy of that book. Like without the support, so this idea that men weren't supporting women, there's a lot of men there, but it's very interesting because sometimes it has the smell of handing out the favors, which is unfortunate. Yeah. And Robert Lowell was a real champion. There were many men who were a champion, but it was so difficult. When Flannery gets, when you're a great artist, you touch society, and society's going to have problems with you. She's not an angel. She's nobody's perfect person. She is a human being with many flaws. But it was very tough to be an aspirer. If you aspired to write serious fiction, like I want to be like Kafka, I want to be like Dostoevsky,
right?
And
top tier writer.
I want to be the real thing. And I'm willing to do the work. I'm doing the reading. I'm a sincere. I have a sincere spiritual life. I'm trying to write about serious life and death issues to give to other people, and I want to do it. And to a large extent, it was men could be generous and help you along. There was no avenue for her to march down. She had to burn a path.
Forge her own path.
And it was very difficult. And so a handful of men were really kind and really supportive, and we're grateful to them for that. But it was still really hard because, even like that, we dramatized one of our first rejections from Wise Blood, is the reaction from the publisher was, yeah, you're terrific. Now take out that bit and take out that bit and take out that bit, and we'll publish it. And she's like, no, I'm really trying to write a new kind of novel, and I really want you to believe in it. And that takes such...
Yeah, she stuck to her guns in a way that was extraordinary.
And what is the right manifestation of pride, right? Well, because they would say, honey, I let you in this office. Honey, I'm inviting you into the club. Just play by the rules.
Yeah.
I belong in this club. I don't have to, and that's where the subtlety of systemic sexism, systemic racism, all of this is really subtle, because a lot of the people that think they're doing you a favor are actually doling out the pennies in a way that is insulting.
Yeah. Mike, go ahead.
Some of it is, some of it's subtle and some of it's explicit, and a lot of men, there was the Fitzgeralds as a couple too, but had to kind of come forward and be Flannery's teachers and advisors, partly because there's no network of powerful women to have that role, and to bring forth other young women, and the network that exists encouraged women to believe that they were primarily in competition with each other, and that any spot at the table for one of them was taking the spot of someone else, and so. And that exists in the racial landscape, in the female. It's just like there's plenty of spots for as many different white men, but there's only one seat at the table and so everyone's in competition with each other, and then there's no support of each other, and then the network breaks down. But what I think is the intention of the Robert Lowell Flannery relationship in the movie is both to sort of demonstrate the life she didn't get to live. She lived this very small life where she did get to learn a lot and grow in the person she was and the way she thought about the world at 17, where she just had the influence of her mother and aunt and Georgia, and the person that she was when she died were very different, and she grew a lot. But she didn't get the life she could have had, and the mind she could have had, and the way she might have changed her mind about the world if she'd had the opportunity to live in the world. And experience love and change and friendships and independence and living by herself, and might have really been different. And so we wanted to sort of show the window of what could have been possible if it had not been for the lupus.
He was kind of the one person. I don't know if she would cop to this, but she has a line about him, and that he is a kind of grief to me. Is that the one sign we can find in her letters of somebody she really had a love for was him, and it seemed that when that went away, combined with the loop, she just didn't have any much hope for herself with romantic love. And she's very clear often as, I don't want to be a nun.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I'm becoming a nun, and Lord, I don't want that. Do I have to go that path? I would rather not be a nun. I want love. I want to feel. I want to be loved.
I want friendships. I want adventure. I don't want to go back to Georgia, but
she didn't get that. Yeah. But
constrained by the illness, certainly.
And that was the blow. That's what opened her up to her great wisdom, and what restricted her. What the Hilton Hall says, that thing is her regionalism is her great strength and her great setback.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Tell me about, at the end, you close with the image of the peacock, and of course she loved peafowl. She always called them. Had this kind of interesting relationship with animals, and the peacock especially. And it was the great display of the tail feathers that she saw as an anticipation of the second coming of Jesus. That it was like the culmination of all things. It was like a rose window. All the elements within the feathers of the peacock. It's like an integrated vision of things. It's the world having come together. And the fact that, again, a peacock's kind of a difficult animal, uncooperative. It will show this display when it
when it
wants to.
feels like it.
See, but that's also grace. I mean, we can never control God. I mean, we can never control.
And we don't understand it.
No, and it manifests itself. But it's like James Joyce's line about, my job as a writer is to report epiphanies when they happen. So I can't control epiphanies, but they happen.
But they do
sometimes.
happen.
And then the writers are, let me tell you about that. And she, I think, was a great reporter of epiphanies in a very distinctive way.
The peacock is an amazing symbol
What
that
else
really
do you see
hadn't
in
been
there? Yeah.
really hadn't been used. I see it as, I can't believe, like when you sit in Notre Dame,
Yeah.
or one of the great cathedrals around the world, the feathers look like a giant stained glass window in Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Or a stained glass window in Notre Dame looks like peacock
Yeah,
feathers.
right.
It also looks like the galaxies.
Right.
It looks like the planets,
Right.
and it looks like outer space to me.
Yeah.
They look like eyes. Just so many eyes. And I find it, seeing.
Yeah.
Are you seeing? Are you really looking?
Yeah. Go ahead.
And I think all that is there, but what moves me about it more than almost anything else is that's the pinnacle for her, the peacock.
Yeah.
But you can trace back through her life this love of birds.
Yeah.
And chickens.
The chicken walking
chickens.
backwards.
Who loves
Pigeons,
chickens?
like
Yeah.
doves, and
Yeah.
it's there is of course the majesty of the peacock in the tail, but in the core there is a lifelong love of birds.
Yeah. So how do you read that? How do you?
And the birds that are mundane as well as ones that are spectacular.
Yeah.
And for someone who lived their life just so caged, and grounded and contained, but who looked up at the cosmos
Yeah.
and saw infinite possibility, and the potential for majesty, to have this fascination with both flighted and flightless birds. The peacock and the chicken are
'Cause
both
she was a bit of both,
relatively
huh?
flightless birds.
Yeah.
And so to me, that is what is so moving about it, is to have love for the most beautiful painting you've ever seen that's hanging at the Met, to have love for a child's drawing.
Yeah.
A cartoon, like the spectrum of what is possible in the
Yeah.
arts and all the different people that it's possible to do it, to have love for a pigeon
Right.
and to have love for a peacock, and this ambition and connection towards the sky, and towards nature,
Yeah.
which is like if you're ever if you don't feel connected to God at church, maybe go for a walk.
Yeah.
I grew up not in any kind of disciplined practice of faith, but I grew up with a disciplined practice of nature, of
That's a
going
classical
on
spiritual path.
walks
Yeah.
in the woods and seeing different parts of the world and playing with stones and walking through streams and looking at frogs and salamanders and
Yeah.
and being and getting in cold water and feeling what that feels like, and on a hot spring, and all of the different physical sensation, connection to other people, connection to your body, connection to the world that being in nature can give you, and can give you to other people that you've never met before. You can hike up to the top of a mountain on one of those trails and watch the sun hit the trees as it's going down, and you realize that you've all got to walk down, and you're standing with 5 other people you've never met before at the top of that mountain, and you feel so connected to them. You all went on this hike, you're all sweating, you all are aware of your body and aware of the sky, and those people are your friends and your people in your community. All of a sudden, instead of a them, it's an us.
Yeah.
It's the us that walked up the mountain.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all trying to do, is turn as many people in the world as possible from thems into us's. And whatever way you know how to do that is good. And so I see, to me, the birds are how I connect my relationship to spirituality to Flannery's.
Yeah.
Even though we grew up in such different ways, is that nature is the connective tissue.
Yeah, that's good. That's a classical spiritual path.
Well, I didn't I'm trying to reinvent the wheel.
No, but it's beautiful. I mean, enter into nature is one of the paths to God,
Oh, for sure.
classically. How about the chicken walking backwards? Because you begin with that, and it's this wonderfully Flannery, quirky thing that,
But
as a young girl,
it couldn't be any more Flannery O'Connor. I think I wrote it out here. When she was
Yeah.
when she was a kid, she was Pathé Newsreel came
Right.
to Georgia to film her. Do I have my glasses? Because she, I
And
don't
this
think
is a
I
real
do.
event in her life. This really happened when she was a girl.
You know, here's an odd, and then in silent film they do this, because it seems like I mean, it happened when she was 7 or something,
Yeah.
and it seems like she could have written it. Here's an odd
Right.
fowl that walks backwards to go forward, who could look behind to see where she's going.
Right.
I mean, it's so...
right out of her stories,
It's right
isn't
out
it?
of her stories, and it's in a way, but Pathé News did it, and they're just being kind of funny. But she is an odd fowl that walked backwards to go forwards, to
Right.
look behind, to see where she's going ahead. It's like, it's so perfect, and it's kind of a circle. You know, the symbol of a circle was very important to her, and
Yeah.
and I just find it's just such an odd thing.
You really taught me about this when I was a kid, but I've thought about it all the time, and it's interesting to think about it while you're making a life into a story. Is our human lives are not stories. Like events are random and without necessarily metaphoric connection, and you're only the hero of your own story in as much as you can convince yourself that you are, and then draw your own metaphoric connections based on random events that actually have nothing to do with each other. Like, oh, I saw a red cap in a puddle yesterday, and then that girl at the coffee shop had a red cap, and maybe I'm in love with her now, you know, like, and because I saw the caps, and so it's magic. And maybe it's magic. Maybe it's not. And it is if you decide that it is. And the connection of the birds and opening with the chicken, and there's a very important chicken joke to me later in the story, and the peacock at the end, and the connective tissue is how you take a life and turn it into a story. And you can do that for yourself, and you can do that for someone else. And maybe it's the true story, maybe it's not, maybe those are the important moments, maybe they're not. But
Well, it is important to note that we don't know. What's wonderful about Flannery O'Connor is we can read her writing and get to know her. Maya and I and our collaborators set out to make how Flannery inspires us. So, and that's the thing about a biopic, the genre of
Yeah.
it. It's very important. It's like painting a picture of somebody. It's not them. It's our
Yeah,
picture
sure.
of them. We've chosen certain aspects to highlight. Certain, you know, our story ends when she's 25 years old. You know, and a lot of that was I was sitting there going, "How do I make a movie about Flannery O'Connor with Maya? I've been hired to do such a thing. I don't like old age makeup and stuff like that. I want to focus it in a concise period of
Yeah.
time when she was." And then I got lucky. When I realized what a pivotal moment, this was the moment in Flannery's real life where it all went down. Her father died of lupus. She got diagnosed with lupus at Maya's age, and for a brief period of time, she thought she had days to live. And this was this was her grace moment, where she was knocked sideways. She had a huge life she thought she was going to have.
See, and that's why I thought you chose Wildcat, because the Wildcat story is about a man who's waiting for this wildcat to come and kill him. And when's it going to happen? I don't know. It happened before, and it might happen again. And she lived her whole life in a way under
The next
gun.
interview I do, that's the answer
That'll be
I'll
the
give.
answer,
Yeah. Because no, it is right, but also that's the story she wrote around. Really, we didn't include that one because I'm trying to include where she arrived at with her writing. But it's a wonderful short story, and it is one that she wrote when she was around Maya's age.
Very young,
and
yeah.
it's the waiting for death and fear.
What's the line from A Good Man's Hard to Find? Yeah, she would have been a good woman if
She's
there'd
had
been
somebody
someone
to
to hold
shoot
the
her
gun
every day.
against her head every day
No,
of her life.
Yeah, she would have been a good woman if she had somebody to shoot her every day of her life. and you know, that story riddles people's brains over and over again for the last 70 years. I mean, it's just so, because you sense from the author that she kind of likes that murdering misfit. And you sense from the author that she's very judgmental of the woman that it's like, who's the bad guy in that story?
Yeah, but to your point, Maya, she realizes how connected they are. You're one of my own children.
Yeah, that's
She
the
says by
grace in
end.
that one.
And it's the grace, yeah.
Yeah.
And she ends up, even though she's shot to death, she's looking up to heaven with a smile on her face.
Yeah.
There was a moment of grace for her, that encounter.
It's very, that story catches our interconnection very beautifully. And also, this woman's fear of the misfit and everything almost invites him into her life.
Yeah, right.
You know, she's the one obsessed with the
Right.
newspaper article about them and everything.
Yeah.
And then she's so arrogant. She wants to take them. She thinks she remembers exactly where it was. She gets her whole family lost. It's actually her fault they're even there.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, she's such talking about Gone with the Wind, being brilliant, and you know.
I'm sure you heard her reading of that story.
Yeah.
Which,
Once or twice.
how can you not? I mean, I can't read her without hearing that voice.
Oh, I know.
Once I heard it, it's so extraordinary.
What's the first lines, Maya?
Grandmother didn't want to go to Florida. She wanted to
Florida.
visit some of her connections in East Tennessee, and she was seizing every
Yeah.
chance to change Bailey's mind.
I can't read any of her stories without hearing
me
that
too.
voice, you know. And it's not just the Southern drawl. There's something there's so just perceptive.
Oh, it's
in
also
that
very
voice.
uncliche Southern. Which one of part of that Maya's challenges of playing her is it's a Southern Georgia with a wild intellect.
Yeah, right.
With you know, she's not saying, you know, hey y'all,
Right.
let's go get the cows some dinner. You know, I mean, she's
Right.
talking about wild ideas
And Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
Right. Let me maybe close with that. What was the biggest challenge? This had a lot of challenges, I imagine, because playing her, but then playing, 7 other characters. How about playing Flannery, though? What was the biggest challenge as an actor?
Well, the biggest fears and the
Yeah.
biggest challenges are different.
Okay.
The biggest fear is I'm going to make a fool of myself. My accent won't be believable. I'm going to look stupid. I'm not right for this. But those are fears. The good thing about the fear things is that they're mostly either things you can totally control, or things that you can't control at all.
At all.
Yeah, right.
Like there's the fear that your accent will be terrible. Like work really hard at it. Maybe it'll still be terrible, but you can really try.
Yeah.
And you're gonna make a fool of yourself. Well, read the stories a lot, read the script a lot, know what you're doing. Like you can really try. And then you're gonna be bad, maybe. You can't control that. You
Right.
are what you are,
Yeah.
and you will be what you will be, and people will think you are whatever it is that they think. The real biggest challenge was, I think, maintaining her ferocity, rage,
Yeah.
loneliness, and not an intelligence, and not becoming totally depressed. And
Going home
totally
tonight with
isolated.
all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was I remember having feelings while we were filming where I was like, I think I'm the loneliest person in the world. And I wasn't. We were living together.
Yeah.
I had friends in the movie.
Yeah.
And so they were not
you're-
my feelings.
But you invite those thoughts into your imagination, and
Right.
they set fire.
And they set
Yeah.
fire, and so that was the biggest challenge. Actually, was not allowing that to go too far.
Listen, thank you both. I so enjoyed the conversation. I could talk about Flannery O'Connor all day.
Clearly, so could we.
Yeah.
No, and you can too, but I love the script, and I look forward to seeing the movie, and I think it's
I
a
really
great-
think you're going to like it, and I actually really learned a lot on this interview. I really appreciate it.
really helpful.
I really I like the way you think, and it's funny because I'm editing it now, and I'm now so caught up in the movie. It's nice to talk to somebody like oh wait, what did you like about Parker's Back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I liked about it too. Got to make sure I got to get that shot back. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, good.
Right, I cut that line. I got to put that back in.
Well, good. Thank you both again. Delight being with you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.